Welcome to Pen and Perspective, where the story always knows more than it's telling. Every word is intentional, every silence holds a truth. Let's get into it. I used to believe that if you did things the right way, the ground under you stayed solid. Not perfect or easy, just solid. I grew up watching men who cut corners and men who paid for it later. Watched deals get made in back rooms and promises die in daylight. Somewhere along the way, I decided I didn't want any part of that. I wanted things I could stand on, buildings that didn't hide rot behind fresh paint, paperwork that held up when somebody finally looked close. That was my whole thing. Mixed use spaces, communities that actually worked, places where people lived, worked, and stayed rooted instead of getting pushed out quietly. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. And it worked. It mattered to me that it worked. My family always said I was stubborn. My father called it principled. Ayla said it was just me needing to understand the why before I ever moved. Warren used to joke that I was born tired of bullshit. Maybe all of that was true. I loved my people, loved our friend group. We weren't perfect, but we were consistent. We showed up for birthdays, for wins, for funerals, for hospital rooms. We knew each other's rhythms, or at least I thought we did. And Dante was family. Our businesses ran close enough to touch but never crossed lines, adjacent lanes. We helped each other when it made sense, shared contacts, shared advice, shared long nights talking through deals that didn't feel right yet. But I never told Dante everything, and not because he gave me a reason not to. He'd never ever betrayed my trust, just because something in me always held back a half step. It was instinct. I handled Dante with care. Always had. He was sharp, charismatic. People listened when he spoke, and he was good to me. Showed up when I needed him. Went to bat for me when others questioned my choices. Never made me feel small. But I learned a long time ago that closeness doesn't mean access. And Dante never pushed for it. That's what made it feel safe. Sandra used to say I overthought people. She said trust didn't need footnotes. That love didn't need contingency plans. And with her, I believed that. With her, I didn't hold back. I let myself be seen fully, flaws and all. Finding Sandra felt like finding water after years of dry ground. She saw me without asking me to shrink, loved me without needing me to perform, loved the way I worked, loved the way I moved through the world, loved the fact that I came home tired but honest. I didn't know how rare that was until everything else started slipping. The night of the accident still plays in fragments. Metal, light, the sound of my own breathing too loud in my ears, the hospital ceiling sliding past me like I wasn't attached to my body anymore. I remember thinking I was lucky to be alive. I remember thinking about Sandra. I remember thinking about how annoyed Ayla was going to be when she found out I didn't call my dad first. And then I remember the officers. They moved like the decision had already been made. When they started talking about blood alcohol levels, something in me went quiet. I hadn't been drinking. I knew that. They knew that too. Or at least they should have. But they talked like the story was already written. That was the first crack. I didn't fight it out loud. I've never been that guy. I watched. I listened. They stepped out of the room for a minute after that. Said they needed to confirm something. Sandra was the first one in. She didn't rush me. Didn't panic. She just came straight to my side. Took my hand like that's where it belonged, like nothing else in the room mattered. Her eyes searched my face. Me. You okay? She asked. Said, I don't understand what's happening. She nodded like she didn't either, but she wasn't about to let that show. Ayla came in next, then Michelle, Brian, Dante, Terrell. T. Greaves stayed near the door, quiet like he always was when he was reading a room instead of speaking in it. It hit me then seeing them all there that whatever this was, it wasn't small anymore. Someone mentioned Taylor. She's still out, Ayla said. They said she hasn't woken up yet. That stopped me cold. Taylor was family. The idea of her laid up somewhere unconscious while all of this was unfolding felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Like pieces of the same story were happening in different rooms and nobody was allowed to see the whole picture. I remember thinking, this is too much for one night. The officers came back in while Sandra was still holding my hand. Their tone had changed, formal, detached. They said they had to place me under arrest. Sandra leaned down and kissed my forehead before I could say anything. slow, steady, like she was anchoring me to something real before they pulled me away. Terrell spoke up immediately. On what grounds? He asked. And then I felt it, relief, sharp and unexpected, because Terrell was there. Because whatever this was, I wasn't walking into it alone. If anyone could slow this down, it was him, but nothing slowed. It moved fast. Too fast. Fear started to creep in. I didn't know then who was involved. I just knew something was wrong. In the months that followed, that knowing hardened into certainty. The sentencing didn't feel real. I stood there listening to my life get reduced to language that didn't fit. Words like reckless and impaired floated past me like they belonged to someone else. I kept waiting for someone to interrupt, to say there had been a mistake, to correct the story. No one did. I looked at Sandra first. Her face was calm in that way I knew meant she was holding herself together for me. Her eyes never left mine. Then my mother. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, not broken, just stunned, like her mind couldn't reconcile the son she raised with the version being described in that courtroom. Ayla's jaw was tight, furious, silent. When the sentence came down, there was a brief moment, just a flicker, where everything felt unreal, like I was watching a scene instead of living it. And then it landed. They were taking me away, and this wasn't a misunderstanding, and this was happening. Jail has a way of sharpening your attention. You notice patterns. You notice who watches you too closely and who doesn't watch you at all. You learn how silence sounds when it's intentional. I started hearing things from the outside, not details, not explanations, just signals. Sandra's voice on the phone changing, Ayla asking questions she never used to ask, Terrell choosing his words carefully. And then there was Dante. Very few visits. When he did visit, it felt off. Support that felt performative instead of rooted. He never said the wrong thing, never shared a vulnerable thought. That hurt more than I expected. Because when betrayal comes from someone you already feared, it lands where you're armored. But when it comes from someone you trusted enough to let stand beside you for years, it rewrites the past in real time. I didn't know yet what Dante had done. I didn't know yet what Brian had signed. I didn't know yet that Taylor's silence had a shape. All I knew was that the ground under me wasn't solid anymore, and whatever cracked it didn't happen by accident. Update 1. Jail teaches you how to listen. Jail has a way of sharpening your attention. At first, I was still thinking like a man who believed this would get fixed quickly. I counted days instead of weeks. I replayed court moments in my head, looking for the sentence that would undo everything. I trusted process. I trusted truth. I trusted that being right would eventually matter. That version of me didn't last long. Jail strips noise fast. There's no room for outrage, no space for disbelief. Everything is routine, repetition, control. You learn early that reacting too much costs you more than staying still. So I stayed still. I watched faces, learned rhythms, noticed which COs spoke to you like a human and which ones spoke to you like you were already gone. I learned when to speak and when silence was safer. Learned how to exist without giving anything unnecessary away. I didn't fight out loud, but I paid attention. Guards didn't hide it well. Some of them were indifferent. Some were annoyed. A few were too comfortable, like they'd seen my name before I ever stepped inside. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I filed it away. One of them stood out early. Officer Dean. The first time he looked at me, it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. From the beginning, he made things harder than they needed to be. Extra counts, late tray, a shove that looked like an accident. Nothing you could point to. Nothing you could prove. It escalated slowly. Just enough that I could heal by the time visitors came. Enough that no one would notice unless they knew what to look for. I didn't tell anyone. Some things you keep until you know what they mean. Terrell came as often as he could. Every visit grounded me. He never sugarcoated, never offered fake reassurance. He talked about motions, timelines, possibilities. He didn't say if, he said when, but there was strain in it, a tightness I hadn't heard from him before. That scared me more than the bars. Sandra came too, steady, stronger than I felt half the time. She never cried in front of me, and I knew that cost her something. She told me about the kids, about work, about the small details of life continuing without me. Ayla burned hot every time she showed up, protective, furious, ready to fight walls if she had to. Michelle was quieter, always had been, but she showed love differently. The care packages were hers, not just snacks. Thoughtful things, notes tucked in, books someone mentioned once, socks that actually fit, stuff from the whole group collected and organized like she didn't want me to feel forgotten by anybody. That mattered more than I told her. I trusted all of them. Months passed, the abuse settled into a pattern. Officer Dean didn't stop, but it became precise. He knew when visits were scheduled, knew when to ease up, knew exactly how far he could go. Information from the outside came in fragments. Terrell mentioned inconsistencies without details, just enough to let me know he wasn't letting this go. T. Greaves visited once, stood across from me with his arms folded, eyes sharp, saying less than he knew. "You're not crazy," he said. "Something's off." That sentence stayed with me. Sandra called one night late on the burner. I knew her ring immediately. That soft double buzz we'd agreed on for emergencies only. "I need to tell you something," she said low. She told me about the call, the inmate line, the voice that knew her name, the warning. "Don't trust everybody in your friend group." I didn't react. I couldn't afford to. But something settled into place when she said it, like a lock clicking shut. Not panic, clarity. Taylor visited too. Not as often as Sandra or Isla. Not like before. But she came. She looked different, thinner, quieter, like someone who'd been through something she didn't yet have language for. I chalked it up to the coma, the recovery, the weight of surviving when other people didn't. She carried guilt heavy. You could see it in how she avoided my eyes at first, how she over-explained things that didn't need explaining. I never once thought she'd betray me. She was family. I worried about her healing, about what she remembered, about what that night had done to her. What I did know, what I was already certain of, was that the night itself had been constructed. Too many people saying the same things in slightly different ways. Too many explanations offered before questions were asked. I learned how to brace without flinching, how to catalog pain without reacting to it, how to let rage cool into something usable. Officer Dean started watching me differently after a while, like he expected something. I didn't give it to him. I accepted that this wasn't random. I was different, harder around the edges, clearer in my thinking. Jail didn't break me. It disciplined me. Someone wanted me tired, distracted, focused inward, surviving but not thinking, healing just enough to function, hurt just enough to stay quiet, which told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was happening on the outside was bigger than me, and it scared the right people. So I waited, I listened, and I let them believe they had time. Update 2. Time passed without shape. Officer Dean stayed consistent. By then I understood the pattern. A beating told me I had a visit coming up, and it would happen early enough for the bruises to fade. Always, like clockwork. If paperwork was moving, something went missing. A form delayed, a request misplaced. If I ever pushed back verbally, never loud, never reckless, the consequences came later. Quiet, when nobody was watching, when cameras just happened to be angled wrong. What scared me wasn't that it was happening, it was that someone knew enough to time it. That meant coordination, that meant information, that meant I wasn't just dealing with a cruel corrections officer, I was dealing with a system that already had a script. I needed to survive first, understand second. That's when the replaying started. The gas station started bothering me. 9 minutes? That's how long we stayed. At the time, it felt like nothing. Bathroom break, water, a conversation that drifted. But inside those walls, 9 minutes stretched. I started asking myself questions I hadn't asked before. Why didn't I rush her? Why didn't she rush me? I replayed the cops too. Their tone, their confidence, the way certain facts were treated like conclusions instead of questions. I remembered which details they leaned into and which ones they skipped clean over. Somewhere in there, recalibration set in. Jail doesn't deliver truth cleanly. It hands it to you folded, torn, already breathed on by fear and rumor. I learned about Reggie's barbershop during a visit. Ayla leaned forward, voice low. telling me about permits and paperwork and how something that should have been simple had glided through without friction. Then she said Taylor's name, not as a victim, as a facilitator. I didn't accuse her in my head, didn't reach for betrayal. She was family. Trauma changes people. Comas rearrange time, memory, responsibility. But her name entering the story differently lodged somewhere I couldn't shake it. A couple weeks later, I learned about Brian and Dante. Apparently, Brian fell behind his gallery. That was the story anyway. A couple of people told me nobody believed him. The explanation didn't land. Too vague, too casual. Then Dante got beat up a few days later. Worse. Hospital room, bruised, swollen. I heard he laughed it off. Called it kids, said it wasn't a big deal, but nobody believed him either. Not even the people who loved him. Cap, still lying. 2 men hurt, 2 stories that didn't hold, both close to me. Not random, not street chaos, too clean. Then there's Taylor. What the fuck? That's when I knew, not who, not why, but that. Someone was applying pressure. Around then, I got a new cellmate. Quiet, Nigerian, observant, the kind of man who didn't rush to introduce himself to chaos. We talked in fragments at first: food, time, the way incarceration teaches you what patience actually costs. Eventually, he told me he was fighting something that never should have landed on him. A case built on shortcuts and assumptions. A life paused while paperwork pretended to search for truth. We didn't bond over anger. We bonded over endurance. I started bouncing frameworks off him. Not names, not theories, just structure. He helped me keep my mind sharp when my body was under constant threat. Reminded me that surviving didn't mean shrinking. And then Sandra called again. This time there was a note, left where it could be found. 2 words and keep going. I sat on my bunk long after the line went dead, fighting the instinct to hope. Hope is dangerous in here. It makes you careless. It makes you visible. But something flickered anyway. Not relief, resolve. If someone had gone out of their way to warn her twice, then whatever had been built around me wasn't as airtight as they wanted it to be. And for the first time since the doors closed behind me, I let myself think the unthinkable. That maybe I wasn't buried. Maybe I was just waiting.